I hear a lot of love in your voice for John and Vance, Sioux Falls, and the whole VTV experience. And I feel the same way with Bill Wiley and Shamik Bafna. That's exactly how my fellowship was, except the focus was all refractive and cataract. So you go through such a unique period of time, compressed. You're not needed there, you're wanted there, and you are blessed with the knowledge and attention to develop a level of surgical skill that takes maybe 5, 10, 15 years in solo practice if the environment is right, if you have the inner drive, and if you have the ability to do that much surgery. So you're in this, what seems like a perfect place.
Unicorn Palace.
Unicorn Palace. Why not stay there?
Good question. And a lot of former fellows did, for sure. I needed to come home to Philadelphia. It was home. It's home. And I am in the type of family structure where, although I, for lack of a better term, need my parents because they're my parents and they're my shining lights in life, they need me more than I need them. And I felt as though if I didn't come home and raise my child near them, I would be doing them a huge disservice. And I feel as though I owe it to them because they were great parents and they raised me with the right ideals, I think, to try and be a good human in the universe and take care of my fellow man. But there's no one more important than your family. So I knew I needed to come home to Philadelphia. And I also felt like I needed to do my own thing because at the point that I was finishing fellowship, there had already been 4 or 5 former fellows who had stayed in the VTV network, started their own practices through VTV in various cities. And they're all doing wonderfully. They were all doing wonderfully. But I felt like I wanted to do something else. And I also felt like I might have more opportunities if I wasn't in the VTV universe. There are only so many opportunities that can be given to all of the different doctors within VTV. And I felt if I were doing something completely different, I would have more opportunity. Now, I ultimately decided to come back home and had to figure out what kind of job did that look like. And I decided between various private practices, going back to academia. I thought about going back to Shea. And ultimately landed on a job that seemed like it was going to be a great fit. Physician-owned private practice. Really has a lock in the county, which is just outside of Philly. And takes care of patients well, has a great reputation in the community. And what I really wanted was to kind of emulate what they do at VTV with a graduating fellow who opens up their own office, where that fellow opens up that office, they assume the liabilities and whatnot, but they share the sort of back office of VTV. So the billing, the marketing, all of the MSO related things. That's what the agreement seemed to be with this first job that I was going to join. They opened up an office for me. I got to say what sort of equipment I wanted or needed in that office. And I was the only MD in that office. And as with everything in life, I came in hot and I thought that everyone there knew who I was and like what I was coming from, what training I was coming from. And it's like you said, most people out of training don't get to do thousands of surgeries in a fellowship year. And therefore, the first couple of years in practice, you're really getting your feet wet and trying to figure out your surgical skills and your autonomy. I didn't need that coming out. I'd been operating solo for a year, high volume, 4 days a week, basically.
But not just that, you had learned throughout that year the business aspect of medicine, the administrative aspect of medicine, how to interact with staff, how to lead staff, how to market, how to co-manage, how to network, things that are traditionally not taught in normal fellowships.
Totally. And I mentioned before how my wife usually has a good sense of when I should be on guard or not, even if I don't have that sense. And I think back to a conversation I had with the partner in this practice who I had most of my communication with leading up to it. And this was when I was still the fellow, and he had kind of been a little bit like denigrating towards me and definitely talked down to me about a lot of different things. And any idea I brought up was instantly shot down of like, this isn't going to work here, blah, blah, blah. And at one point I responded and I was like, sometimes I feel like you just want me to come put my head down and do surgery and kind of keep my mouth shut. And this guy responded back to me saying, your skill set is going to be surgery, but your weakness is that you don't know the first thing about business. And I get it. I was not and am not an expert in business. But that also was a very large component of that fellowship. And I did feel like I had things to share on that front that could be done differently. And Morgan told me, she was like, you got to go. I was like, nah, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Jump ahead a year, and it continued where any new idea was met with a lot of resistance. I wanted to cross-link because it's the right thing to do for patients, and they weren't interested in that. I wanted to host dinners and do things for the staff differently. But what I realized is that that practice was set up as a partnership, not as a business. And as a business, what's important is what's best for the business. As a partnership, what's best is what's best for the partners. And what's best for the partners is for an associate to drive down your overhead so you can collect more. So I started getting busy. I started doing a decent amount of surgery, and I was doing the nice mix of cataract, refractive, cornea, and glaucoma. I had a great environment in my office. It was just me with my staff. But I was constantly getting told, like, do things differently. Do it that. You shouldn't do it this way. Like, you shouldn't be co-managing with that person. And a lot of it seemed to just feel like he was threatened. And then finally, on one day, I got 4 separate phone calls from 4 separate optometrists in my area saying, why did so-and-so just call me asking why I'm sending patients to you and not to him? And why did he threaten to stop sending patients back if I don't shift my referral patterns? And it was on that day that I realized I needed to go. Because that was a poisoned relationship. And that person demonstrated that he didn't respect me and didn't want what was best for me and my family. And so I ultimately decided to look for another position.
But before that, I saw you go through this start to finish. You really did your best to make that work.
I worked hard at it.
And you even went to the partners and presented sort of a different path forward.
Yeah, I did. Presented a 5-year plan. Yeah, and it was smoke and mirrors. They nodded while scrolling on their phones while I was presenting it. And actually, to be honest, it was sort of at that moment where I realized that I couldn't see myself sitting in this boardroom once a month for the rest of my life with these guys. Like, we're not the same. I really didn't feel that they cared about the same things that I cared about from a patient care perspective. One of them did. But one of them used the line that we were talking about really sick eyes, and like some sick eyes are just, the type that they're just constantly betraying themselves. It's these like pathological myopes who get an RD, then they get another RD, and then they have cataract surgery young, and then their lens dislocates, then they get glaucoma, and these eyes that are constantly betraying them. And I made a comment while I was doing a suture lens with this guy, the retina guy. He's like, sometimes I feel like we're just like a speed bump on the way to blindness for some of these people. And he was like, no, we're a toll booth. Meaning we collect money on each.
Wow, that's not what I was trying to figure out the interpretation as. Wow.
Yeah. I hated that comment. I hated it. And I felt like that defined a difference in the way that I wanted to care for the patients. And I think that they care about people in general, but I also think that they're very, very bottom line driven to the point where they've maybe lost a little sight of that. It just felt that way. I think they're reasonable people, but ego gets in the way, and when you make X amount one year and you make a little less the next year, it doesn't feel good, so you want to make more. So anyway, I decided to seek another opportunity.
But it wasn't all for naught. You took that skill set from VTV. You went through that quintessential early period that every young ophthalmologist goes through where the safety net is no longer there. They built an office for you. You had support staff. You were able to build the culture of your office.
Totally.
To how you wanted it to be. You got to practice networking and getting referral sources in real life. And ultimately, although that job didn't work out, you're able to parlay all of that into what you have now. But what happened next? I don't want to interrupt. I'm sorry. The bridge to redemption, that never was.